We're ready. All right. How many people in here have ever done any war driving?
Nobody.
Wow. How many still do it? Not a lot of you, huh? Hey, there's nothing wrong with it. Anyhow, this is going to be, this talk came about as a result of some conversations on the NoVA hackers list where some people were asking questions about gear for war driving, how to do it. And so I said I'd throw together a talk and give it, and here it is. My standard disclaimer, you know, you're responsible for your own actions. I'm not telling you to do anything. If you do war driving correctly, it is not illegal to do it. Although there are some of the tools that you may be using for war driving that a little touchy gray area there.
Unless you're Google, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So why you should listen to me, or who am I? Well, I'm not old, at least not in the wireless world. I'm just well seasoned. I've been into RF communications since 1973. That's a little bit of time. My stats right now on Wiggle, I have over 216,000 sites, brand new APs with geographic locations discovered. Started war driving in 2005. I was a latecomer and been contributing to Wiggle since 2006. And as always, don't take my word for it. Go out, do your own research, do your own investigations, especially with some of the gear and stuff, and let people know what you find out. We're always interested. So what I'm going to talk about is war driving itself, some boring facts in the beginning. What are the minimum requirements? What happens when you put it all together? What are some of the rigs that I've actually used to do this? So, war driving is searching for wireless access points while driving around using a computer or so. That's the general standard definition of it. Some of the other forms that are around now: war walking, war kiting, war biking, war railing. I've done all except for the war kiting. I'm a little old to be flying a kite. So here's the biggie. Connecting to a wireless access point for communication purposes is not war driving. This confuses a lot of people. The purpose of war drive is to discover and geographically map wireless access points. Not to connect to them, not to do anything malicious with them, just to find them and let people know where they are. Another popular definition from a friend of mine, Chris Hurley, Romer, some of you may know him at, and is the act of moving around a specific area and mapping the population of wireless access points for statistical purposes. And we'll see a little more about this later on. So, war driving itself is believed to be started in the San Francisco Bay Area by a gentleman by the name of Peter Shipley. Actually, a lot of people had been doing it prior to Peter, but they were mostly going around and doing it and recording it on pen and paper, manually collecting the information, manually recording the information. Peter Shipley actually went out and wrote the first application that was used to actually map this automatically, do all the recording and everything else for that. So he is considered the father of war driving. So some of the things, a little history. 1997, 802.11 was ratified. So wireless hasn't been around that long. 1999, 802.11a, 54 megs. And in 2008, the 3.5 gigahertz band was added to the 2.4 gigahertz. And then 802.11b in 99 as well. 802.11g came out in 2003. And 2009, 802.11n. And the next thing you're going to see on the horizon is 802.11ac. 802.11ac is said to be giving 500 to a gigabit of throughput. Just like the 54 gigabit with 802.11g and n and everything, those are theoretical. You're probably not going to get that in actual practice. And there are two different modes, the reason why the 501 gig for AC. So depending upon the bandwidth you use and stuff. But there are devices out there now. The price is starting to come around. I would hesitate to get into this unless you're really into wireless like I am, because the 802.11g spec has not been ratified. And for those of you that's been around long enough to remember 802.11n when it first came out, a lot of manufacturers had their own versions of it, and it wasn't standardized, so people got stuck with gear that ended up not being part of the ratified spec. So, anybody know what this symbol is? Well,
Wardriving.
no.
Open.
Okay, open access point. Does that help? How about this one? Well, and this one?
Web.
It's an encrypted one. This thing's called war chalking. Has anybody in this room ever seen an instance of war chalking? You actually have?
Nope.
Seriously?
Yes, at a con where somebody was showing us how to do it.
We used it at Interop one year, but we printed out the signs so people knew like what it was.
Yeah. That's real interesting because I personally have never seen this. It's a lot of bunk. Don't go down it. Doesn't matter. And that's not the purpose behind war driving. So, what's war driving all about? Well, this came out sucky, but some of you may know this little building that sits right here in this space. But these are all wireless access points that have been discovered by someone and input into the Wiggle database in and around 2600 Pennsylvania Avenue. So, what's the minimum requirements? You got to have a platform, you got to have an operating system, you need software, you need a network access card, antenna, and a global positioning system. Yeah, you can war drive without a GPS, but how do you know where the wireless access point was? You know, that's the whole purpose behind it, is to geographically map these things. So we'll talk about a platform, PDAs. One of my first war driving rigs was a PDA. It was a compact iPack with a sled and a, is that the Linksys? Yeah, it's a Linksys card there, which was a knockoff of the Orinoco Gold card. Yep. A laptop. Well, I use a couple of them. I use my MacBook. I use a netbook, and you can't see it, but sitting under the netbook is also a D600, D620 that I've used for war driving. Smartphones and also tablets. Right now, what I use a lot, unless I'm going on a long distance trip, is my my Android device with some Android software. It makes it real easy because this is a self-contained device. The wireless access point, you've got your GPS built in, you've got the software running on it, and the battery life on these things are phenomenal. A lot better than these where I have to have an inverter, and this thing had about an hour worth of battery. So, operating systems, all these operating systems work. Any of them can be used, just depends on which one you want. So if you're running Windows, Mini Stumbler, Net Stumbler, Insider, those are all that runs on Windows. Mini Stumbler and Net Stumbler is where I started. Mini Stumbler is what ran on my PDA. Net Stumbler is what I ran on my Windows boxes. Insider is the latest version of Net Stumbler. I don't think Net Stumbler has been updated since 2004.
Been replaced by this Stumbler.
Yeah, Stumbler and Insider and stuff. Kismet, probably the one I have used the most. It's a nice, Dragorn did an outstanding job with that. Kismac is what runs on the Mac, and for those of you that are Mac aficionados, there is a new version of Kismac, finally got updated, and actually works on whatever the most current OS is. And of course, Wiggle for Android devices. So, wireless device selection. This is probably one of the most critical elements. For those of you that do pen testing, it's a little more critical because you want to make sure you've got something that injects. But for war driving, you don't need injection. These are some of the devices that are in a box I got at home or with me or somewhere laying around the house. There's one right here that you can't see because it's black. But Alpha Cards is probably the most well known. This AWS 051NH is extremely hard to find. I don't think they make it anymore, but it's ABGN. The Rockland N3, that's what this device right here was. It's probably used to be my favorite one because its sensitivity was even better than the Alphas. The Roswell right now is my favorite device. It's got 2 antennas. It's a little bit bigger, but it's got some excellent specs. Zero Chaos and I ran some tests against the Rockland and the Roswell and found the Roswell is actually performing better. Maybe the fact it's got dual antennas. I think it's actually a chipset. And then a card I used quite a bit was the old Ubiquiti SR71, which had 2 antenna inputs on it as well. Mine was PCMCIA based, which is still a fairly good card to use. I liked it. So the chipset is the key. Good chipsets, Atheros, Raylink, Realtek. The OK Now, Centrino, like the Intel 4965, when they first came out, they weren't very well supported. You're seeing a lot more support for them now, especially in things like Pin2 and Backtrack and Kali Linux. The bad, stay away from Prism. Seriously, that's actually the name of a wireless device. And Broadcoms. Some of the Broadcoms, like the BR43, is being supported these days, but still, it's hit and miss. There's a lot of troubles with them. If you stay with these top 3 here that are pretty popular, widely available, and don't cost any more or any less than some of these others.
Do you know of a good way to find out the chipset of whatever Wi-Fi card you may or may not be looking into?
Yes, there's an FCC site that you can go on and get the FCC number off the back of it and look it up.
Before you buy it?
I do.
If you just search for the model and chipset, usually someone's got it posted.
Actually, I don't think I have it in here, but in the notes, which will be with the slides that I put up on the site, there is a link to the Aircrack NG website, and Mr. X, Thomas, has done a real good job, him and his supporters, of keeping up-to-date list of devices by their manufacturing name and stuff, and which ones are the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I always go there. Yes, sir?
Which chipset does the Roswell card use for the Roswell device?
I'll get to that. So antennas, I think. If not, I'll answer afterwards. Omnidirectional antennas usually look like this. They're fixed. You got mag mounts. And don't buy one of those, by the way, if you see them. Directional antennas, there's a Yagi. I like the Yagis. Cantenna, got a Cantenna. Panel, I actually have a panel antenna.
What's wrong with the mag mount?
This mag mount, this particular model, and I'll show you a picture of it, they're cheap and they don't give you the dBi that they say they do. Does it work? Yes, it works. You know, if you're on a tight budget, buy it. Or come see me, I may give you one. But it's cut off down here at the bottom, but some of the things to look at, like this antenna, is about a 2 dB antenna, and you can see that the gain down here. And you'll also see the radiation pattern is going up high. So you don't pick up signals as good as you do with an Omni as a directional. 10 dBi, you get a little more directionality, a lot more strength, distance. And with 13 dBi you do, but these are directional. There's a 7 here too. I've got a 7 dBi with me if anybody wants to take a look at it. But the directionals give you a lot of strength, but they put it in one direction. For Wardriving, I would stick with an omnidirectional. Pin testing, I start with the Omni to discover the wireless access points, find my target, and then I go to a directional to make sure I'm getting a strong signal. Some of the antennas that I have, this one, you can see the double hump on this. This is advertised as a 7 dBi Omni. Don't buy it. It's not 7 dBi, it's cheaply made, and it works. But this one here, if you can see it, it's a single piece, it's all smooth. This is the one I have in my bag on my Alpha right now. This is from Alpha. It works well. Here's another one that's got the little hump in the middle. Don't use it. This is the antenna off my Roswell. It's pretty good. It also supports 5G and 2.4 gigs. And then this is just a little small one that came off of the original Alpha that I bought. See, I even have two of those little cheap things. These here are, these two are panels, and they're somewhat directional, but the nice thing about all three of these here is they have little clips, so you can clip it to your laptop. This is a mag mount. This is what I use when I'm doing long distance hauls and stuff. This is a 7 dBi antenna, and the mag mount base on that thing's about that big around. It weighs about 5 pounds. Couple of computers there. So, GPS selection. The original GPSs I used were serial based. Most GPSs you run into nowadays are USB based. Whatever you do, make sure, do your research, make sure it's NMEA compliant, and what that is the output format of the information you're getting from the device. You want to do that simply because all of the software that you work with require that to be able to read the GPS information correctly and put it into your systems.
And GPS is expensive?
No.
Making the mistake doesn't help.
I'll talk about that in a second. Nowadays, like I say, with smartphones and tablets and stuff, the GPS is built into them, so you don't need an external one. But usually if I'm doing a long distance trip or I'm going to a new area and I want to maximize the signals, I do use my external antenna and everything because I got greater gain, and I do use my UPS GPS device. The ones I've used, the BU303 10 channels, that was the original one, cost me about 35 bucks. A couple of years later I bought a BU353 for about $45. Much better, got more channels. Some of the latest models, the 353 S4 is out, has 48 channels. One that is really good right now, runs about $85, is the Q-Star. It's got 66 channels. Yes, sir.
What's the significance of the channels for a for a UPS device?
The channels gives you the greater fidelity. So the accuracy of within, like if you look at a GPS, it'll tell you it's good within so many miles, so many feet or whatever. The more channels you've got, the more satellites it can pick up, and therefore the greater sensitivity and the accuracy. Yes, sir.
Is each satellite giving off more than one channel?
Not sure.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, the generation.
Yeah.
Various generations, they ran
Yep.
through the different GPS satellites. The newer ones do have multiple signals in and out. The older ones, most of those constellations are retired at this point anyway.
Yeah.
They have usually single orbit now.
And how many channels are the newer
I
constellations?
don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah.
More than 3.
So putting it all together. When I started in 2006, my first rig, like I said, was a compact iPack. I had the Cisco AeroNet 350, mini Stumbler, and a BU303. It was real nice, walk around with it, you know, could put it in the car, run it and everything. Bad part, poor reception. The antenna is just built into the top of the card. Short battery life, was 802.11b only, and lots of different pieces and parts. I had to have a cable for the for the GPS device, so I had to have an adapter from the bastardized connector or whatever they used on the bottom of the iPacs. It was just kind of unwieldy. So I moved to a Dell C400, and shortly after replaced the C400 with a D400. Both of these were work computers. Was running Windows XP, had the Intersys Roamabout, which was nice. It was the next version of the Orinoco Silver and had an input for an external antenna. And that's when I bought the first one of those cheap mag mounts.
That wasn't the 900 megahertz room out there, that was still 2.4.
Yes, it's 2.4. And then the BU303 still, I kept that running for a couple of years. The external antenna worked kind of well. Bad thing is I had to spend more money, had to go out and get an inverter for the car, or an hour later I was done. The mag mount, like I said, was cheap. And again, that card was 802.11b only. So third and fourth generations, D400 to a D620. I made the conversion over to Linux. I ran Auditor at first with Kismac off of Auditor. I ran Backtrack. I also, through work, acquired a Ubiquiti SRC card. And it had two, so I went and bought me a second cheap mag mount. One of the things that I started doing was I took a panel antenna, which was directional. I put it on one of the inputs to the SRC, and I'd take my Omni and put it on the other input. And it was about this time that I also acquired the heavy-duty mag mount, thanks to the Wireless Village at DEF CON. That was really good. The nice thing is I started picking up some new stations with the 802.11a and 802.11g. And again, it's larger footprint, but I had to have my inverter, but I already had them, so what? So in the back of my SUV, I'd set it there and drive around. Then I went to a netbook. Netbook did not have the PCMCIA to support my Ubiquiti card, so I went out and got myself an Alpha. And I still have the Alpha, still use the Alpha from time to time. I used a nice mag mount. Also used some directionals and higher gains antennas depending upon what I was doing. And unfortunately the Alpha didn't support 802.11a. And what I do right now is I was lucky enough last DEF CON to get a Ninjatel phone, first Android device I owned, and like everybody else that got one, went out, rooted it, and started putting some software on it. And then the Galaxy Note, I've got a Note 10.1, the Android OS, internal antenna. The big con is no external antenna, limited range. I find that with it, I pick up about 27 wireless access points sitting at my dining room table. With my Roswell and my laptop, I pick up about 49. So a little bit of difference there, but going back and forth to work or just riding around in the car, whenever I'm going, turn it on, throw it, in the seat or whatever next to me, and just leave it there, and it collects. Nice thing about these things is battery life runs forever, especially the Galaxy Note. So,
Question.
Yeah.
Where does the 5 gigahertz come into play with it?
5 gigahertz is 802.11a.
Okay.
So if you look at Wiggle, as of the 12th, the statistics, there were 102 million unique DBs, Wi-Fi networks, 100 million of them with location. And then that's out of 1,857,766 unique Wi-Fi locations there. Something that's been added in the last 2 years to Wiggle that I haven't got into yet is doing collecting cell towers in addition to wireless access points. The interesting statistics, and I've got a chart I'll show you here in a second, is WPA2, about 34.7% of the sites in there are now showing WPA2. WPA is 11.4%, WEP 21.7%, and 17% have no encryption whatsoever still. And then there's 14 with networks crypto unknown.
What does that mean?
That means they could not identify whether the encryption was WEP, WPA, or WPA2. There are some things that people run wireless that have other means of encryption on them. For example, one of the solutions that I designed for a former company who had to support a version of encryption that the company didn't allow was to take the wireless access points and feed the Ethernet from the wireless access points to a Cisco router and then run between two Cisco routers, run IPsec. So we ran IPsec was the true encryption going across open wireless access points. And then 5.2% of the networks still have default SSIDs on them. So Linksys is still there, folks. So,
ATT Wi-Fi.
yeah. ATT Wi-Fi, don't laugh. If you're a pen tester, set up your machine with ATT Wi-Fi. Every Windows phone will connect to it.
Also iPhones.
Yeah, every iPhone, unless somebody's done something.
Yep.
So wireless networks over time, you can see how it's grown. So 101 million here. And these graphs here are how many were added in the years.
That's when you went on vacation.
From the time Wiggle started through now, you can see that the number of unencrypted wireless access points has gone down. Those that are encrypted has gone up. WEP has gone down. WPA2 has increased significantly since 2010, and WPA has kind of petered out. So, Wardriving's simple, it's easy, anybody can do it. No reason why you shouldn't, doesn't cost you anything. Most of you may have the gear already. And the goals and how you go about this just depends on what you want to do with it. There's a couple of sites, OpenBMap and Wiggle, that you can upload this information to, and they track things. OpenBMap is much smaller. And again, like I said, you can also use it for part of your pen testing. You discover your target networks, and then you can home in on them, start doing things like fake AP or a Metasploit, any things I wouldn't know about. Unencrypted WAPs are still out there. Those of you that happen to be in some area that may want to take a chance on using somebody else's wireless access point, even though it may be illegal to do so, it's a way to find one. And default SSIDs are still out there as well. Any questions?
So have you seen people shut off the SSID?
Shut it off? Doesn't matter. The tools I use pick it up whether it's broadcasting or not. Back in the day, it might have been. A lot of people thought that was a way to help secure it, but all you're doing, if somebody knows what they're doing in wireless, it's a 1 or 2 second thing.
So are you picking it up by listening for the ping from a box that would connect to it, or are you doing something else to find the actual AP without anybody trying to find it?
Actually, it self-announces itself when somebody connects to it.
So there is an action required that someone else for you to find it?
Yes.
Okay.
Unless you happen to be running something that's looking for any AP. Yeah.
How about 802.11 AC?
You should have been here at the first of the talk.
I was taking the pizza box. Damn you!
802.11 AC, the spec is due out and is expected to be ratified next year. I would hold off on buying anything because it's not ratified, it's not standardized yet. But there are some companies, Netgear's got stuff, Cisco's got stuff, Apple.
Secure 5 had a
They're almond plus on Kickstarter a few months back.
Yeah.
The Asus
But-
one has some really great features too. If you get one that works, the
Yeah.
hardware's still pretty flaky on it.
Yeah, there's a number of articles about it, AC and some of the devices. Buffalo actually has wireless access points and the clients. A lot of companies are making the access points, not too many are making the clients yet. But I would advise holding off unless you're really into it. Yeah, Rob?
AC, you lose a lot of distance though, right?
Yes. Yes.
So when I was doing this, I noticed that there's different types of connectors for different types of antennas, and I didn't have a job at the time, so I was just trying to switch things around. Can you talk about the different types of connectors, maybe?
Yeah, like
for swapping them out and being aware of that.
well, not so sure about swapping them out and everything. These two antennas here, you'll see the little wire coming off of them. And these two right here and this one here, these all have the little small MMC connectors on them. What I'm using nowadays is the RPSMA. That's the one that goes on the alphas and looks like this and like this. The SMA is a little bitty thing. You'll notice on my this one here, this actually comes with an N connector, so I had to buy a pigtail that changes into RPSMA.
Got it. So when you said that you normally use the bidirectional, omnidirectional, sorry, antennas to find the Wi-Fi, and then you switch over to the directional, you're not just changing the antenna, you're actually changing the card out, is that correct?
No, I'm changing the antenna in most cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have you observed any attenuation of some of the longer cables?
Not at these frequencies that much, no. I actually use, low loss cable most of the time, because at 2.4, especially at 5 gigs, you start getting into that. But you can get the lower loss cable and it pretty much does it. I mean, this thing here, I've got a section about that big around and about this diameter of cable just coiled up and tie wrapped. That's just useless because I don't need that much cable, but I didn't want to cut it and resolder the connector. Yeah, Joe?
Are you Wardriving any other frequencies?
Am I Wardriving any other frequencies? A, B, G, and N right now.
Is that it?
Yeah, I haven't got into cell phones yet.
The only reason I'm asking is Mike Osmond basically just dropped, Greg Scott just dropped his 40 megahertz to 6 gigahertz software defined radio.
Hack RF jawbreaker, got one at home.
Okay.
I have done Bluetooth too, but that's still 2.4 gigs.
We gotta move.
I gotta go.
We got a lot.
One more question? Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been at least 7 years since I've done anything like this. So pardon me for not being up to date. But what if anything is being done to characterize the difference between stuff that's an SSID with no crypto on it that actually offers access to the internet, and one that is, say, a captive portal, where, because there's a lot of guest, blah 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 dash guest type stuff out there, just a captive portal, or something that's just a DHCP server hooked up to the back of the VPN concentrator, which is a trick I've used before, and I like Carolyn.
Hang on, I think I covered that.
Never.
Last bullet. To do all the things you just asked about, you have to actually connect and associate with that. That's not part of Wardriving.
So there's no association going on at all.
Unless you're using the Windows-based tools like NetStumbler, Insider, and MiniStumbler, they actually made a connection, which could be deemed illegal because it is against the law in the United States to associate and connect to a wireless access point. You do not have explicit permission to do so. That's why I went to Kismet and Kismac and Wiggle. All right, thanks.